Climate change in China.
China emits 7,711 million tons of carbon dioxide annually.
China accounts for 23% of global greenhouse emissions. China took the lead over the United States in 2005. The United States now accounts for 19%. Environmental pollution is having a negative effect on the health of residents and is speeding up climate change. The actual economic effects exceed the cost of the environmental pollution. Valuable scientific research and time is being spent on studying environmental damage instead of spending time on advancements in science and technology.
The consequences for China in the future of not correcting the gas emissions, the air pollution, and environmental issues is dramatic. People will not choose to live where they cannot breathe freely and raise their children in a healthy environment. Environmental pollution is weakening the health of people in the cities and regions. Air quality has been a significant issue in many of the cities in China. People are often seen wearing masks to filter pollution particles. This definitely hinders China's tourism and advancements in business. The result is that pollution is hurting China's economy, considering the annual losses account for 10% of the total GDP.
The New York Times reported that in the northeast Chinese city of Harbin last week, the air pollution was so thick that schools were closed, traffic became gridlocked, and flights in and out of the metropolis were canceled. For years, severe air pollution and rising carbon emissions have been downsides to China's economic growth, even as that growth has lifted more than 600 million people out of poverty. The government of China has reacted and is working on these problems. Emissions fell sharply from 2006 to 2010, according to a new study by Chinese and American researchers, preventing as many as 74,000 premature deaths from air pollution in 2010. The result is that China may be making a difference, but not winning the real war on emissions control.
China has been involved in multiple COP Conference of the Parties for Climate Change. According to the New York Times report on the COP, China's investments to decarbonize its energy system has dwarfed those of any other nations, and its forceful regulation to reduce sulfur dioxide emissions from the power plants may be one of the most swiftly effective air pollution policies ever implemented anywhere, because its faith is mandates has met its match, an economy that is growing too fast, and atmospheric challenges that are too multifaceted, or even the smartest planners to tame. The Chinese government was forced to act. The air quality particles last January were reported in Beijing at levels 20 times the particle levels recommended by the World Health Organization for a 24-hour period. The most important reform for China is the creation of a domestic Chinese price of carbon through emissions markets in 7 pilot emission markets in China. Although it is not an answer overnight, it is a powerful beginning. The policy can limit emissions and air pollution with little cost to economic growth.
We believe that although China could do more to mitigate and adapt to climate change, there is a hope for a brighter future. China has started to take responsibility by signing more agreements and limitations. When comparing the U.S. emissions per person to China emissions per person, it is evident that although China is number one in overall emissions, they are not number one in proportion to the population. One very progressive move is the carbon emission tax. This may be the single most change agent in all China's plans. The pilot is in 7 areas, and if it works, it could limit emissions faster than anything else. China is certainly a country focused on economic growth and prosperity, and at the same time it is comfortable with governmental decisions. With this growth could be a progressive policy of carbon emission markets that would be accepted if enforced by the government. China is the world's largest carbon emitter, and with a growing economy, there is no doubt that China will play a major role on global climate change. China is well aware of the needs to be a powerful economic leader and a country controlling its emissions for future well-being. Irrespective of other countries, it seems like China wants to be progressive and a leader in a movement toward environmental controls and health.
Not long ago, experts claimed that China was neither administratively nor economically ready for emission markets. Now Beijing is determined to create a nationwide emission market by 2015. The decision stems from 2 realizations by Chinese policymakers. Firstly, that China must curb its use of fossil fuels irrespective of what other major powers do, both because of energy security and China's domestic vulnerability to the effects of global warming.
Although China is seen as the world's largest source of emissions, it seems that a lot of work is being done to limit emissions. This is mostly because of the large population. China has been looking very seriously at emissions controls and economic solutions. Although China never agreed to the Kyoto Protocol, China signed the Copenhagen Accord in 2010. Copenhagen Accord is a 3-page non-binding statement reached at the end of a continuous and chaotic 10-day conference. In 2010, China also signed the Cancun Agreement, locking in emissions targets for 80%. China also signed COP17 in 2011, making plans for carbon emissions reductions by 2020. The country plans to reduce its emissions by 17% over the next 5 years through industrial reconstructing, changing its energy mix, and following a low-carbon development plan. It has also set itself the target of reducing its carbon intensity by 40% and 45% over 2005 levels by 2020.
China is seen as a leader in the switch away from dependency on fossil fuels. Not only is it known for having the world's largest production of coal, it is also known as the largest emitter of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases. According to news agency in 2014, for its post-2020 contribution, China announced in November 2014 that it aimed at peaking CO2 emissions in 2030 or earlier, and at achieving a share of 20% non-fossil energy in the total primary energy supply. Consequences of climate change include temperature change, more frequent rains, and rising sea levels. According to Asia Pacific Journal in 2014, China is building the world's largest renewable energy system, which by 2013 stood at 378 gigawatts and generated just over 1 trillion kilowatt hours, by far the largest in the world. In terms of generating capacity, by 2013, China's WWS sources, meaning water, wind, and solar, accounted for more than 30% of capacity. This means that the WWS total was close to 20% of the energy generated.